Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Matt Rhule, Nebraska, kicking off fall camp July 31st. And Dylan, want to hop into some of our biggest storylines for this Nebraska program as they go through fall camp. And this is one of those fascinating programs to take a look at heading into fall camp where you got a lot of new faces, specifically some young talent at some important positions, kind of trying to earn their spot heading into the 2024 season. And I think we are both kind of in agreement. Year two under Matt Rhule, I think, is going to be a lot cleaner of football for this Nebraska program. Really excited to get into some of these storylines. Before we do, and as always, just want to say thank you to you guys first. A massive shout out to the Nebraska fans. It is no secret we love talking this program. The amount of support y'all continue to show to the fellas truly does mean a lot. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. But, much more importantly, would love to hear some of your storylines that you're going to be keeping an eye out for during fall camp in the comments section. That's what we're going to be talking about over the next couple of weeks for this Nebraska program. So let it fly down in the comments section. And Dill, without further ado, let's start with, I think, the most exciting part about fall camp, the young breakout players. Every single year you read the fall camp practice notes, you start to hear some buzz of guys that might be year one players, year two players that are kind of putting their stamp on what they're going to mean for their programs heading into the 2024 year. If I were to give it to you, I'll give you the T-box here. Year one, year two player that you think breaks out during fall camp for this Nebraska program.
Who I'm going to have my eye on is Vincent Shavers. And I think you kind of see the way Nebraska is trying to move this linebacker room forward, if you will, get more athletic, have guys who are a little bit better in space. I think you saw some things from Vincent Shavers and probably still a little bit of size to be put on and a little bit more development. But he has the athleticism, I think, that will be the prototype for what Nebraska is looking for in their linebacker room, which, frankly, I think, again, you're kind of seeing the transition from the old guard to the new guard.
Vincent Shavers is going to be a dude for Nebraska. And I don't know if it's going to be year one, but he's going to be a very good linebacker for this Nebraska program at some point during his career. And I think you kind of hit the nail on the head. He is a hyper athletic linebacker that can do so many different things in this Nebraska defense. Now, he's not necessarily the biggest frame yet, so I think that might hold him off the football field as a freshman. But if he does kind of put on some weight and put it together between the years, you're looking at a linebacker that in a linebacker room that there's a lot of question marks. You don't have bona fide starters heading into the 2024 year. Vincent Shavers could certainly be a freshman that kind of works his way into the lineup. I'm going to go to kind of an under-the-radar player that I think is massively important to this Nebraska defense. That's going to be sophomore Riley Van Poppel. And Dill, that's a conversation that we've had a lot for this Nebraska program. Hey, look, we don't have any question marks about Ty Nash on the inside of the defensive line. Where our question marks come is, all right, what's the depth going to look like on the inside of this Nebraska defensive line? Riley Van Poppel, undersized as a freshman, played some really quality football. He's obviously put on some weight during this offseason. I think this is a very, very good 2D player, and you're going to need him to be a very good 2D player because, again, the question marks for this Nebraska defensive line are not the starters on this unit. It is one of the better interior defensive line duos that you see in the country. But if Riley Van Poppel can emerge as that depth guy and maybe allow Ty and Nash to not play as many snaps as they did in 2023, I think that would be a massive storyline that not a lot of people are going to be talking about during fall camp.
And especially for Van Poppel, I mean, the only thing was that, just lack of physicality.
Yeah.
Kind of you see the athleticism, you see some moments where he's using his hands well and getting into the backfield. But when he was trying to eat up double teams and do some of the things that what make Nash and Ty so good at what they're doing and allow that Nebraska defense to kind of run the way they wanted to run with linebackers playing free, that's kind of some of the moments you're like, either there needs to be another year. There needs to be another year, needs to get bigger, needs to get stronger. So when you talk about, physical development just happens. I think that you kind of can really look to Riley Van Poppel to be a big, big factor in this Nebraska.
Dude plays his tail off. Why was he able to play as a freshman? I don't know if there's a better motor on this Nebraska defense than Riley Van Poppel. I love watching him play football. Now, getting into some of our big storylines. And by the way, I would love to hear from the Nebraska fans in terms of those year one, year two guys that you think kind of break out. I personally think that's the most fascinating conversation going into fall camp. You got to start with freshman quarterback Dylan Rola. we're going to talk a lot about this storyline over the next couple of weeks, so we don't need to go that in depth on it right now. This is my big question mark, and I said this all the way to the start of spring practice as well. I'm less concerned with the flashy throws that you are inevitably going to see on the social media pages. There are going to be plays where Dylan Rhule makes a jaw drop, making some extraordinary throws down the field. We all know that he's the most talented quarterback in this room from a pure arm talent standpoint. What keeps freshman quarterbacks from having success, or just keeping them off the field in general as year one kids at the college football level? It's the command of the offense. It's the leadership aspect. That's kind of what I'm looking for, is how consistent is Dylan Rola day in, day out of fall camp. You hear from coaches all over the country, fall camp is when you show if you're going to be able to play, in terms of, are you able to be consistent every single day, stack consistency. That's what I'm looking for Dylan Rola. I know we're going to see the flashy throws. I want to read the fall camp notes and say, another good day from Dylan Rola, making high-quality throws, keeping the ball out of harm's way. Because if you get that, if you get a freshman quarterback in Dylan Rhule who can make all of those jaw-dropping throws, but also plays within the offense and takes care of the football, that is going to be probably the biggest storyline for this Nebraska team in 2024.
Because that storyline sets everything up. Because I think, again, we look everywhere else in this Nebraska team, you feel pretty good. You've brought the kind of weapons, and you need the offensive lines turning the corner, becoming a very good unit. I think if Dylan Rhule can make this thing work, if he can get that team going from an offensive perspective, I mean, that was the one thing, or is the one kind of fundamental question about
what. And the thing that separates Dylan from me is this kid, I've said it before, he's born to play quarterback. Like he was born with a football in his hand. And so from a between the ears standpoint, like I kind of have a lot of confidence, and I think he has a lot of confidence in himself that he can take over and run an offense at the Big Ten level as a true freshman. I don't think there's a lot of quarterbacks across the country that you could say that about. Now, I think the second biggest storyline for this Nebraska team on the offensive side of the football, and really the second biggest storyline for this Nebraska program, is what they did in terms of the offensive weapons they brought in. The quarterback play wasn't good. The offensive weapons were not good yet last year either for Nebraska. Obviously, some injuries at running back and injuries at wide receiver kind of forced to play true freshmen that you kind of knew needed a year. You look at this Nebraska offensive weaponry heading into 2024, I think a fascinating conversation is, how does the rotation play out? You're bringing Jamal Banks. I think we're both really confident that he's going to be that wide receiver one, that guy that can pick up the chains on third and long, a guy that can separate, make plays vertically down the field. Dill, I'll ask you this. Some of the young talent that is going into year one or year two, what offensive weapons do you think have the ability to kind of emerge as guys for this Nebraska team in the 2024 year?
Well, I think you know it. I mean, you know the three who you're kind of looking at. It's Lloyd, Barney, and Coleman. Those are the guys that have, I think, the talent level you want. You saw from Jalen Lloyd a big spring game, looked really, really good. But at the end of the day, you need to see the polish on these guys to kind of take form, where they're separating from routes. I mean, you even kind of go to some of those games like the Michigan State game, not a great secondary they're playing, and guys just not getting open enough, being in traffic, just not making it happen for their quarterback. So again, a lot of those things were issues that, the quarterbacks took the bulk of the heat, but the wide receivers probably earned their share of it too. So I think, again, you know who the players are. But for guys like Malachi Coleman, I mean, not a great year last year, obviously, but a guy who's so talented, as talented as anyone in the country. So I think you look, him, Lloyd, Barney, can a couple of those guys step up and complement what you obviously have with Jamal Banks and Isaiah Ney.
I think you said the word compliment. That's kind of what I'm thinking about. You look at Jamal Banks and Isaiah Ney were both 6'3 plus. I believe Jamal Banks goes 6'4", 205. I mean, big physical boundary wide receivers that can work vertically. Who are the wide receivers that are going to be able to operate with the football in their hands? You look at a guy like Jalen Lloyd, not only can he burn vertically, but he's a guy that when you get the football in his hands, good things are going to happen because he's the fastest player on the football field. Ja'Cory Barney Jr., this kid is a human joystick. I mean, you talk about movement skills. I think there is a reason to believe he can get on the field year one as a freshman. I'd probably point to Carter Nelson as well, and I thought it was really telling what Matt Rhule said about Carter Nelson during Big Ten media days, where, hey, we're going to start him out at wide receiver because he's a difference maker and we got to get him on the football field. He might not be ready from a physicality standpoint to play inline tight end and get it done blocking, but we think he can be a difference maker as an offensive weapon. You put him in as a jumbo slot, the guy that can work vertically down the field, the guy that can be an animal with the football in his hands. I think Carter Nelson is probably the guy that I'm keeping an eye on, a guy that we didn't get to see in spring practice, but coming in for the summer, he's going to be a hard guy to keep off the field. Now,
speaking of tight end, I think that's a big position you want to see more from. I think we were so like you go back to the 2022 spring game. It is if I'm getting these 2023 spring game. Sorry, you saw Borkshire make some plays. You obviously knew the talent that Thomas Fedone has. I think that's another position like, well, can these guys make it happen? And again, a lot of it, quarterback certainly didn't help them last year. But these are two guys that I think, again, like kind of the way Penn State thought they were going to get, that's what was going to drive their offense was good tight end play. I think Nebraska has that in their room. I think they have two guys you really, really like. But I think you really want to see them make it happen and be more impactful than they were.
I think a massive storyline because you look at what's the best way to make a young quarterback comfortable, like having that tight end that's working the middle of the field as a big body target that can go up and make some plays for you. That's huge in terms of getting Dylan Rhule comfortable in this offense. Can Thomas Fedone be that guy? He's obviously the guy with the most talent in that room right now. I think it's really important for people to understand, and I know Nebraska fans know this, maybe some non-Nebraska fans don't. And Thomas Fedone was a super talented kid coming out of high school, hadn't really played any college football until that 2023 year. I mean, there was a lot of injuries and a lot of stuff that he had to go through. I look at 2023 as that year he got the rust off of him. I think 2024 could be a massive year for this kid in this Nebraska offense. Now, going to the defensive side of the football, I want to start on the defensive line. And I kind of hinted at it in terms of defensive line, young talent development. Yeah, we know what we have with Jamari Butler, Nash, and Ty. The floor is really high. Like there are known commodities on that Nebraska defensive line. How does Nebraska take that step on defense? You went from a really, really good defense for Nebraska in 2023. How can you be great in 2024? I think it starts with guys like Prince Will Yu and Cam Lenhart kind of taking that step going into their second year, specifically a guy like Prince Will Yu, where you look at Nebraska last year, they kind of lacked that elite edge rusher, a guy that when it's third and long, you can say, hey, go pin your ears back, get after the quarterback. Prince Will Yu was always that guy. I was really impressed in terms of what he looked like as a true freshman. I thought there was a redshirt possibility for Prince Will Yu, get on some weight, looked really good as a freshman. If he takes that step going into year two, he's that guy I have circled as really being that difference maker for this Nebraska pass rush.
And he kind of is the guy you look toward because, like, again, Van Poppel and Leonard are going to be big parts of it, but I think they're going to be more big parts of filling that depth and that, frankly, was lacking. So, again, those two, their development is going to certainly be important, but I kind of agree. Prince Will Use the one who I think needs to step up and be a monster. I think his kind of role, no one else can do it for them the way he can do it if he's playing well. So, again, I think important to see Van Poppel, Leonard, even a guy like Sewell Afodu, I think kind of step up and be able to allow Ty and Nash to take a break once in a while. But I think the guy you really need to see go be a star is Prince.
Hey, how about another pass rush? And I'll just continue. Every time I get an opportunity to say this kid's name, I'm going to say it. James Williams. You already knew what I was going to say. Yeah. You saw some serious flashes from this kid. He's only going into his venture. So, I mean, I am just excited about what he can look like going into 2024. Not a guy that's going to start. You talk about, hey, trot him on for some third and long situations. Let him go ahead after the quarterback. Number 4, the linebacker competition. I think the best way to do this is I'll just ask you, we're going to start 2 linebackers in this Nebraska defense. Who are you taking at the off-ball linebacker spot? I think there are 5 names that could be starters.
I mean, Javin Wright, I think, is going to be the guy. I think he'll be the best linebacker in this unit. And then I am kind of interested to see if they really do kind of play with that 2-man rotation or if they kind of work in some other guys on more situational basis. Because obviously John Bullock, when it's kind of a rundown, he's really, really good. Really, really good taking on blocks, really good being physical in the box. And I think that complements probably what Javin Wright needs to improve and where he needs to get better this year. So I like that pairing. But again, when you look at what Nebraska's brought into this linebacker room, guys like Stephon Thompson, Mekhi Bayer, like those are versatile players. I think they have kind of more niche linebackers, if you will. I think Javin Wright's the guy I look at all down, do it all kind of guy. But some of these other guys, I think for right now, are a bit more niche players. So I'm kind of interested to see if they continue to kind of roll their position groups through, where it's not just the same guy, but they're playing them more by
Well,
situation.
I think it could be a fascinating storyline where, a guy like John Bullock, when you're playing Iowa late in the season, he's probably getting a lot more work. But when you go out and play a team like Ohio State or some of the newcomers in the Big Ten, you want a little bit more athleticism at the linebacker spot. Maybe Mackay is the guy that you kind of roll with. There's a lot of guys that I think can play. There are a lot of guys that have played. And then Stephon Thompson, came into Nebraska out of shape, kind of got in the doghouse a little bit. We've heard about guys who got in the doghouse and then get out of the doghouse. Stephon Thompson is probably the most proven linebacker, obviously very familiar with the Tony White scheme. I'm excited to see kind of what he does in this Nebraska defense, a guy that could play off-ball linebacker, could play the jack linebacker, kind of come off the edge. A lot of different things you could do with Stephon Thompson. Dill, last question mark that I have, secondary rotation. Cornerback all of a sudden kind of became a question mark. Blyhill goes down, Ethan Nation now with the team. I'm going to have my eyes on the newcomer Sayre Wright. This is a guy that, again, you go back to the 2022 film, started 9 games for USC in the Pac-12, some elite passing attacks. I think Sayre Wright can be a really, really good cornerback, and I think that's a massive storyline, especially as Blyhill continues to try to get healthy. Tommy Hill, Sayre Wright as your boundary cornerbacks, Malcolm Hartzog kind of using him as more of a nickel or maybe even that safety role. And then I'm looking at Deshaun Singleton, who I'm going to say this, and I know it sounds kind of crazy, outside of Tommy Hill, who I think is probably the most talented football player on this Nebraska team. Deshaun Singleton might have the highest upside on this Nebraska roster. Does he look fully back healthy, and how good is he going to be for Nebraska? Because I look at, Marquise Buford and Deshaun Singleton and Isaac Gifford at that, kind of safety spot, moving all three of those players around. That is a very, very good unit, or potentially a very, very good unit for this Nebraska program.
And with Malcolm Hartzog, I think very capable of playing that boundary corner spot. I think that allows you to kind of shake it out with Deshaun Singleton and Marquise Buford, both of them. With Buford, probably especially, I think can be a very good nickel in his own right. So again, I think it allows you to get Deshaun Singleton on the field at times. I think again, they do have a little bit of positional versatility. I don't probably imagine they're going to see a ton of Isaac Gifford at that nickel spot, but I think the other two are a little bit more capable of interchanging a little bit.
Isaac Gifford just does it all. I mean, he's gonna be the guy that logs probably the most snaps, on this Nebraska defense. Dill, at the end of the day, there's enough good players in that secondary, especially at the safety nickel spot, that like Tony White's going to figure that out. I think we're more focused on the boundary cornerback spot where Tommy Hill, and then if Sayre Wright can be a guy, Blyhill gets back from injury, all of a sudden you start feeling a little bit better about the cornerback depth, especially if a guy like Jeremiah Charles kind of puts it together. I mean, that dude is dripping with talent in his own right. Kind of just trust Tony White to kind of get it right. He's a heck of a lot smarter than I am in terms of scheming up a defense. Those are my biggest storylines. It's going to be a fascinating program to talk about during fall camp. Appreciate you guys rocking with the fellas. Again, if y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. Appreciate you guys, and we'll talk to y'all later. Peace.